From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We start with Colombia, where the head of the military forces has said there is zero chance the Colombian army would cross the border into Venezuela. This comes in response to Venezuela's state prosecutor, Tarek William Saab, who said that Bogotá was plotting to attack the country. General Alberto José Mejía dismissed the accusations of an imminent military action after visiting the border area. The Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos promised last week to send more than 3,000 new troops and police to the border. He said it was to control the entry of Venezuelan migrants.
It's a very professional assignment geared toward eliminating some illegal trails in specific predetermined areas, including areas that have been coordinated in the past with Venezuelan authorities. So the chance that some troops or men from the armed forces will cross to the other side of the border for action or by mistake or because they are lost is zero, absolutely zero.
The Lima group of Latin American countries has rejected Venezuela's decision to hold a presidential election on April 22nd and asked the government of Nicolás Maduro to present a new electoral calendar after meeting in Peru. In a statement, the 13 country members raised concerns about the transparency and fairness of the coming elections and said they will not recognize its results. The Lima group also agreed to coordinate efforts to manage the arrival of Venezuelans to their nations. The Lima group also decided to support Peru's decision not to welcome Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro to the Summit of the Americas, taking place in Lima in April.
Peru has decided that with respect to Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro's invitation to the 8th Summit of the Americas in Lima, that his presence will no longer be welcomed at the said event.
And Bolivia's President Evo Morales has criticized this decision not to invite Maduro to the Americas Summit. President Morales tweeted, "On orders from Trump, the Lima group, with 13 of the 36 countries that make up the Americas Summit, have violated the principle of non-intervention and attacked Venezuela by canceling the invitation to our brother, President Maduro. We reject their support for U.S. plans for a coup." Earlier, our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, sent this report.
Several Latin American countries, part of the Lima Group, are having a meeting today to discuss Venezuela's decision to hold a presidential election on April 22nd. However, it is not a coincidence that the Lima Group gathered together a few days after the visit of U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and OAS General Secretary Luis Almagro to several countries of the region. During his visit to Mexico, Rex Tillerson asked the Venezuelan government to stop the government of President Nicolás Maduro from having national elections. The U.S. President, Donald Trump, also made comments about having a military intervention in Venezuela. Meanwhile, social movements in Venezuela have rejected the Lima Group meeting. They said international groups should focus on other countries where democracy has been attacked, such as Brazil and Honduras, and to have a debate about human rights violations in the United States. Here in Peru, a few social groups are demanding the Lima Group discuss the political situation in this country and talk about the government's corruption cases. We are expecting an official announcement at the end of the meeting.
That was Jaime Herrera from Lima. And in Venezuela, an explosion was registered in an electrical substation in the state of Miranda. This caused a general blackout in several cities around the country. The Minister of Energy, Luis Mota Dominguez, said on Instagram that the National Electricity Corporation helped restore power and that the fire was being controlled. He also denounced this as an attempt to sabotage the power service. The Cuban government has rejected a declaration by the Secretary General of the OAS, Luis Almagro, that Cuba is, quote, the worst kind of dictatorship. Almagro made the statement at an event in the Cuban Museum in Miami over the weekend. He also said the world cannot accept an undemocratic succession in Cuba. Raúl Castro will step down as Cuba's president on April 19. And Cuba's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Rogelio Sierra Díaz, told reporters the Secretary General has no right to judge the Cuban government and its people.
The OAS Secretary General has got no credibility or moral authority to criticize our government and our people. He's made a grave mistake by ignoring Cuba's decision to be a sovereign and independent state. We categorically reject his statement and recognize them as meddlesome. Cuba will continue to walk its own path. We will remain unbowed, opposing the wishes of submissive and craving individuals, such as the Secretary General.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has lost his latest appeal to have his UK arrest warrant overturned. That means Assange will face detention if he leaves the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he has been confined for more than 5 years. Assange's lawyers argued that the punishment doesn't match the crime, but the judge said Assange should have the courage to face the consequences of his choices. He skipped bail in 2012 to avoid being extradited to Sweden over allegations of sexual assault and rape. Sweden has since dropped the investigation. And Assange has said he's surprised by the judge's ruling. He tweeted a statement saying the judge went outside what was presented in court, leading to what he called factual errors in the judgment. He said the United States still wants to arrest him. Assange has 3 months to appeal. Our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, has more details in this report.
Earlier today, here in London, a British court declared that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange had lost his latest attempt to get his UK arrest warrant dropped. Mr. Assange's lawyers had argued that the warrant issued in 2012 was no longer valid because an investigation into a sex-related allegation had been dropped by Swedish authorities. But in a ruling at Westminster Magistrates Court, Senior District Judge Emma Arbuthnot said it was in the public interest to pursue Mr. Assange for failing to answer bail at a police station as he fought extradition to Sweden. The warrant was also upheld by the judge during a previous hearing last week. Mr. Assange has argued that he flouted the conditions of his bail out of fear of being handed over to the US to face an unfair trial for disclosing US government secrets, which he considers a public service. Now 46 years of age, he has sought refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy since 2012, in what the UN considers an unreasonable arbitrary detention by the British authorities. This latest ruling means that Assange would still be arrested by British police were he to try to leave the Ecuadorian embassy here in London.
That was Pablo Navarrete from London. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Sometimes I think we have forgotten about the importance of the Monroe Doctrine and what it meant to this hemisphere and maintaining those shared values. So I think it's as relevant today as it was the day it was written.
Welcome back. Former Guatemalan President Alberto Colom and Finance Minister Juan Alberto Fuentes have been arrested. Fuentes is chairman of Oxfam International, the British aid agency currently facing scrutiny after revelations that its aid workers hired prostitutes in Haiti in 2011. Both men have been arrested as part of a local corruption investigation. Colom was president of Guatemala from 2008 to 2012. With just a few days before the elections for deputies and mayors, communities and social movements in El Salvador are demanding that the Arena Party gives back donations made to the victims of the 2001 earthquakes.
Gathered in front of the headquarters of the Arena Party, a large group of people are protesting against the misuse of $10 million donated by Taiwan's government. People say the party used the money for its electoral campaign.
They should be ashamed if they stole that money. We still don't know how many people died without receiving anything during the earthquakes, and all because the money donated for them disappeared. The word transparency is too big for Arena. They are thieves.
Social organizations marched towards the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, asking for the disqualification of the Arena Party.
Arena is involved in severe corruption. They stole money from public funds. They arrogated it and used it to finance their campaign.
Meanwhile, preparations for elections of the next March 4th go on. The ballots to elect deputies and mayors are almost ready, and some data transmission tests have been done.
We succeeded in transmitting 90% of data, and it was done in record time, never seen before in electoral processes, because the scanners are top technology. This means that around 60,000 ballots will be transmitted in less than an hour.
International observers have arrived, like this one from the European Union, spread around the country's 14 departments.
We will focus on observing the run-up process, campaigns, elections day, and the count. We will produce a preliminary report and then a final one.
Meanwhile, political parties continue campaigning, which include visits to communities and political events. Campaigning will end on February 28th, 4 days before the election.
Members of Colombia's Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons, FARC, are calling for a pact of non-violence during the Colombian election campaign. Last week, the FARC temporarily suspended its campaign because of threats against its candidates. Their statement says, "We signed the agreements in Havana on the understanding that with their implementation, conditions will be met to generate reforms historically demanded by Colombian society. We have completely fulfilled the pact, and despite failures to fully implement the agreement, we decided to take part in the current election. However, the restrictions and limitations are obvious. We have been forced to temporarily suspend our electoral campaign. This will continue until we see a significant change in these circumstances." Colombia's largest guerrilla, the remaining guerrilla group, the ELN, has ended its armed strike in parts of the country as the government issued arrest warrants for 21 of its leaders. We spoke to Richard McCall, peace conflict specialist and journalist based in Bogotá, about the prospects for peace talks with the ELN.
Well, it's going to be very hard for the government to come to any agreement to reach the table again for this fifth round of talks. The reality is that President Santos has incredibly low approval ratings, and he won't be wanting to be seen as a weak president and to go back and sort of meet the guerrillas on their own terms in Quito.
Around 20,000 schools in Peru are at risk of collapsing, according to the Education Ministry. Local authorities and unions are demanding that the government declares a state of emergency in the sector.
This site is in fact a school. It's the Inca Pachacutec School in San Juan de Miraflores, south of the capital Lima. A large part of the outer walls and interior divisions have collapsed or are about to fall, posing a risk to more than 1,000 students who will begin classes in 2 weeks.
I'm outraged because our children are supposed to study here and they're small, so anything could happen to them.
I'm worried because we have already talked about this. We've had assemblies with other parents, but nothing has been solved.
Children come here, young kids, and they can fall. They need a lot of help and support.
This municipality alone, there are 15 schools with the same conditions, and authorities have had to close 3 of them. According to the mayor of San Juan de Miraflores, they've been asking the Ministry of Education for over a year to intervene, but they always receive the same answer: there's no budget.
I feel the central government is working in a way that resembles firefighters. They arrive when the fire has already begun. It can't be like this. It seems like they're waiting for someone to die, to begin working on a solution. And I won't allow that to happen in San Juan de Miraflores.
Nationwide, around 20,000 schools need to be torn down and rebuilt, according to the National Education Infrastructure Program. And according to teachers' unions, it's a sign of the levels of abandonment regarding the education system in the country.
It's not only about the education infrastructure. We have said it before, and we have demanded it from the government, that it needs to call for a state of emergency in the education sector, that there's a problem with implementing education reforms, education models, books, and other materials.
Peru is one of the countries that invests the least in education, with 2.8% of its GDP. The teachers' union has called for a 24-hour national strike on April 5th, before moving to an indefinite strike.
2 mud volcanoes in South Trinidad erupted on Tuesday morning. Homes were evacuated in Devil's Woodyard in New Grant, where the volcanoes are located. The first happened around 4 on Tuesday morning, and the second, which you are seeing in this video, happened around 9 in Trinidad time. Mud volcanoes happen because of the movement of the earth, but they do not produce lava and are not driven by volcanic activity. The Dreamers' problems hasn't ended yet. After landing in Mexico, most of them find a country that they practically don't know. Let's see the stories gathered by our correspondent Pablo Perez.
The first days in Mexico were hard for Jose. He's a dreamer, a name given to the young people who moved to the US with their parents illegally as children, and despite also being educated there, are still considered undocumented. US authorities deported Jose to a country that's not his home.
At first it was difficult for me to be in Mexico City. I walked around here and didn't know how to find shelter or a job. I was afraid of walking in the streets at night.
Despite knowing some Mexican traditions, their native language is English, which brings problems.
People in the street tells you, hey, speak Spanish, we speak Spanish here. They see you as a gringo, and I tell them that after so many time, you adopt a language.
Jamie grew up singing the anthem of a country that turned its back on her, although she still eats tacos and speaks Spanish with her family at home. She is actually very proud of her Latin roots.
When you realize that you are Mexican, you think, cool, that's my flag, my blood, and then you arrive in Mexico and the people tell you, hey, you don't belong here, where do you come from? And so you answer, hey, if I'm not from here, nor there, where do I belong?
The binational youth are organizing to form New Beginning, an independent group that helps deported people find jobs and adapt to Mexican society.
When you knock the doors of the federal government, they play with our feelings. You realize that in Mexico, just like the US, they're playing chess with our lives, and we still haven't found support. Until now, we haven't had access to public funds and must find our own opportunities.
While Donald Trump's government asks for money to build a wall on the border, around the Revolution Monument, where many deported youngsters have found jobs, a binational community is growing. They are known as Little LA, referring to California City.
Pablo Pérez García, Telesur, Ciudad de México.
The United States broke ground on the site of its massive new embassy in Mexico. The new diplomatic headquarters, which cost nearly $1 billion, is one of the most expensive embassies in the world. Built to replace the old one, it is expected to be open in 2022. Among the new building features, there's a cutting-edge energy grid for clean sources of electricity, water, and air conditioning. Officials estimate that about 2,500 people will be employed in the construction.
Mexico is one of the United States' closest and most valued partners. We are neighbors with a deep history and a shared future. Today we celebrate the start of a building that will stand as a testament to both, celebrating our friendship and empowering our diplomacy in the years ahead.
We'll take another short break. Join us after a look at what our multimedia team is reporting. Welcome back. Israeli police have found enough evidence to recommend charging Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with bribery and fraud in 2 corruption cases. Police evidence shows that for 9 years, Netanyahu received expensive gifts from a few supporters, and in return, he pushed for the so-called Milchan law, which ensures that Israelis who return to live in Israel from abroad are exempt from paying taxes for 10 years. Netanyahu has denied the accusations and says he is the victim of a witch hunt by left-wing opponents.
I think it's the right decision about all the suspicion around Netanyahu. It's time to clarify it. It's a lot of suspicion. It's quite important for the country, so it's time to clarify it around him.
If Netanyahu did a crime, he should admit it and come forth and be honest. If he didn't and he has something to hide, then he shouldn't be worried.
Palestinian teenager Ahed Tamimi's trial has begun in a closed Israeli military court, as the judge banned journalists from attending. 17-year-old Tamimi was arrested last December after a viral video showed her slapping and kicking 2 Israeli soldiers in the occupied West Bank. Her resistance to the Israeli forces has drawn international attention and is seen as a symbol of the Palestinian cause. Her closed-door trial has outraged her family and her lawyer.
The court decided today to close doors in Ahed Tamimi's trial because the court is afraid of people coming into court and seeing what's happening, the systematic infringement of Palestinian children's rights. And Ahed is the member of she's the one that shows all of us how the rights are being infringed.
As I have said, my sister has been killed in such a court, and this is why having diplomats and media crews present will keep this court monitored and won't let my daughter be alone in there, and so that the world can see this occupation for what it really is and how racist it is.
Now let's have a look at some other stories from around the world.
Police in South Africa have raided the homes of Gupta family, a close ally of President Jacob Zuma, as part of probe into corruption charges linked to him. The police have arrested 2 people in the raid for questioning. There has been growing pressure on Zuma, who has been asked by the ruling African National Congress Party to stand down as the head of the state. The ANC has announced that a no-confidence vote on Zuma will be held on Thursday. Dutch Foreign Minister Abla Zijlstra has resigned after admitting to lying about attending a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2006. Zijlstra had alleged that he personally heard Putin expressing ambitions to create a greater Russia in 2006. The incident has embarrassed the Dutch coalition government, which has a parliamentary majority of just 1, and has further strained difficulties with Russia.
To not burden the position of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I see no other option than today to offer my resignation to His Majesty the King. I do this with regret in my heart, but in the full conviction that the Netherlands deserves a Minister of Foreign Affairs who's above any form of doubt.
Fans dressed up in traditional African attire gathered for the Kenyan premiere of Black Panther in the city of Kisumu, the hometown of actress Lupita Nyong'o, who has a lead role in the movie. The film is an adaptation of Marvel Comics' breakthrough black superhero story about a king of a fictional African nation. Passengers on board a United Airlines flight from San Francisco to Honolulu had a scary trip over the Pacific Ocean after the casing around one of the engines ripped apart. In the video filmed by one of the passengers, people are seen chanting "brace" while in the bracing position when the flight made its emergency landing.
And with this, we've come to the end of this morning news brief. These stories and many more, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.